There are currently 71 unique animals in Rimworld, and over the next few hundred days I'll attempt to collect one of each kind, while defending myself against raids, mechs, and whatever Randy decides to throw at me. This is the first 100 days of the challenge. On the first day I'm joined by Felix, Mole, and one of the key pawns for this challenge, Are, as she'll be quite useful for taming wilder animals through methods you may call unconventional. Also, we start with a companion animal, in this case Flannel the fox, who will stick with us until the end and nothing bad will happen to it. For now, the focus is on survival and gathering resources to sustain the animals we collect. Based on my rough estimations, we'll need around 50 to 100 nutrition per day, which means planting and maintaining a few thousand tiles of crop. Over the next few days I kept working on the walls, as a cargo pod with 100 skulls drops from the sky, so I took that as a good omen. I kept building until the house was mostly finished, worked on electricity and a storage area with a freezer. A transport pod crashed with a not so bad pig. I didn't really want to save her, but I changed my mind with less than an hour to do so. After that I gave my colony a fitting name. Just a bit later, Flannel got the plague, and I was considering renaming her into Fox 1 to be able to keep track of all the animals I'd collect, but Flannel was too cute of a name, so I kept it. Also, that pig I just saved, yeah, I let it die because I didn't really have a need for her right now. A solar flare came in the middle of the night. It didn't really bother me that much, so I built a small defense tunnel. Also, my rice wasn't growing at all because of the temperature, which put me behind in terms of food. But that same day the cold snapped past. On day 8, the first foe appeared. A mad squirrel decided to challenge me, so I sent my best warrior Felix, who started with an excellent plasteel gladius, which is quite insane honestly. It was over so fast I almost couldn't keep up. At night I had my first harvest of rice. And everyone went to sleep. The rice harvest was really coming in now. And I added some sculptures to improve the mood. I also began expanding my freezer right before I had a visitor to whom I sold my old pants. He also gifted me some useless stuff before leaving. Since I needed more power, I also added some solar panels to my base. Now that it's day 11, it's time to set up some massive walls for the protection of my precious crops and animals. I even bought a pump shotgun from a combat supplier. Also, I got hit by a heat wave, but it didn't bother me so much other than some minor heat stroke. On day 14, while I was distracted by a thunderstorm, I got the first raid of the run. Since none of the raiders were useful to me at this point, I didn't take any prisoners. Also, that heatwave that didn't really bother me, yeah, it got quite serious on Felix. He got better really fast. The next morning, our first animals joined, alpacas. So I made a pen for them, but worry not, they won't be staying in a pen for too long. On day 16, an alpaca has gone mad. It will attack everyone it sees. Arya ended badly hurt after the encounter, so she took it on some walls in the base. Later, I bought a duck from a bulk goods trader. This will be one of the main ways we'll get animals that do not wander into our biome. Day 18. A desperate refugee Durant. I took him in since it was time to expand my base, and it turned out he'd be quite good, other than being ugly, that is. While an aurora was still lighting up the sky, a second raid attacked. On day 20, our first Rambo encounter, but Arya wasn't skilled enough in taming, and there are more optimal ways of taming one. Anyway, it was today when our beloved Flannel decided it was time for her to go live on a colony far far away, where she'll be hunting chickens without a worry. That's right, another cougar haunted that cougar. That's the way of nature, I guess. Late at night, a war merchant with a polar bear came along, but I didn't really have the capacity to take care of a half-ton murderous machine yet, so I sold some stuff and moved on. The next day, I took Durant as a permanent colonist. In the following days, I bought a turkey, bringing us to 3 animals, which I also started renaming to keep track easier. The following days, I kept expanding. On day 26, a farmer named Harker joins the colony. Despite being a bit slow, he'll be quite good at helping around the farm. Later, I accepted the quest protecting an emissary for some Glitterworld medicine. The quest took an interesting turn. So far, Randy has been quite nice. Despite a low side round, I kept working the following days. Another day, another raid. But things weren't going to slow down, so on day 29 a toxic sphere put me in a situation that required immediate action, so I waited until the next day to send Felix through the toxic wasteland to deal with it. And be sure I didn't give him the gas mask. On day 39 a Zit set the stove on fire, which isn't that like their whole purpose, but what do I know. Also, the squirrel must have spent too much time near the waste packs, because just look at what it did to Moll. The next day Durant finished the walls around the base, which meant I was finally able to gather some more animals. So I began the construction of a room where I'll keep all of my animals. This way I can ensure they all will be safe. I don't want to make the same mistake I did with Flannel. The following days went by smoothly. I bought a cow, built, then I fought a boar, moved the animals in their new home. Dromedaries joined. I kept the youngest to raise as my own. With winter slowly approaching, I had a good amount of rice, about 2500. I also made the rice zone for the animal. That was my main idea for feeding them and the colonists, but later I'll find something more efficient. Day 38 looked like a great day for a party, and Are agreed. A random dirt mole loved the party so much, she decided to fall from the sky, but she wasn't welcome, so I let her back into the ground. Just a bit later, a mech cluster came, with an EMI dynamo, but Are took rather quickly care of it. Day 40. I expanded the farm because I had an amazing idea for feeding the animals. The plan? Use hay, simple and effective. But let me explain you why it gets better. You see, about 44 animals can eat grass, and then the rest can eat vegetables and meat, so I thought of just putting them all in a single room. But then I realized it would be much more efficient to separate them into two rooms. One room would be for the grass-eating animals, and the other would be for who's left. This way everything stays organized and feeding them becomes a lot easier. Anyway, I was going to need more power, so I made more generators. Some trombos visited, not much to do about that. And some meat fell from the sky. New day, same story, I kept working on the greenhouse. I also got jump scared by nature. On day 45 I traded with a war merchant. They did have bone rats, but yeah, I didn't want them to have a heart attack or something and nuke my entire zoo yet. I also began attempts to tame a raccoon, which are surprisingly hard to tame. And while I was making the walls of the farm thicker, a low sigh wave hit, so I had Are hunting some bugs to make some fine meals. My cow also got the flu. I think it must have been that raccoon, they are always up to something. I also got a really interesting quest which would allow me to get some waste rats, but it would be quite improbable to tame them since they were manhunting and also in a toxic fallout, so not a lot of time for that. Day 50, halfway through, I had the brilliant idea to caravan out to get animals instead of just waiting for traders to come my way, so I sent Durant and an alpaca with a bunch of rice to sell. When I got there, I bought the best thing ever, a dog. She'll do great in my collection and gave it a proper name when she got back home. The next day, I finished constructing the second room. It only needed a few more touches. On day 53, this mech cluster was the beginning of what would be a terrible time on this map. For now, patience was a better option, so I waited for a trader or a raid or something to come along. And it was quite the wait. All I did was set up my home area and avoided the cluster. I started expanding my home, and the bulk goods trader came, and he had a cobra and a lynx, and since I was having loads of food, I took them. Apparently, if you want to keep animals in a single spot, just make an area and assign it to them. They are quite compliant. Also, I was going to need a freezer for the meat inside the second pen, which wasn't perfect because the animals opening the door to feed themselves would constantly raise the temperature and the meat would slowly rot away. After that, I decided to remove all the rice from the grass eater's pan. Later, I tried taming an ibex dog that had been wandering around my base for the past 20 days. On day 58, Duran threw a party. I figured they should enjoy it while they can. Day 60 seemed like the perfect day to tame the ibex. But nope. Later, Are called Felix a weak-chinned beta, which sent him into a rage. Are managed to tame the ibex after 5 days of trying. As soon as spring arrived, a group of Tox Rider broke into my house, looking for trouble, and they got it. I tried to outsmart them by baiting them with Tox grenades, but let's just say it didn't turn out how I would have liked. My brilliant plan to let them grenade themselves backfired when they had time to destroy my electric smithy and furniture instead. Everything started falling apart, bit by bit. By day 63, I was brainstorming a way to handle the mech cluster outside my base, but I was running out of components. After spotting a ship chunk, I sent Durant to salvage it. Naturally, it became a battle of stupidity between the two of us, when he decided to walk straight through the cluster. On his way home, I had to make a caravan with him and the components just to manually guide him. On the bright side, I tamed the rat, and Are was so thrilled she started another fight with Felix. Five seconds later, they fought again. It didn't last long. The next day, I got something big, a Gaurla land pod. It was going to help me tame dryads. Later that night, Moll went on a food binge during the mental break and somehow got an inspiration, which I never used because I lacked components, and also forgot about it. Oh, and veggie meals fell from the sky. On day 68, I realized you need an actual drum for the drum ritual. Instead, I tried luring the enemy mechs to me, but their range was too long and that plan was ruined. Digging a tunnel became the only option to deal with the mechs that kept me trapped inside my base for the last 10 days. I spent the next 2 days prepping for a final assault, crafting EMP grenades. By day 71 I was ready, but the mechs just wouldn't cooperate. I almost gave up, but decided to risk it anyway. Somehow nobody died, but Felice got severely burned and collapsed in the worst possible spot. And I sold a ton of rice and bought a yak. Day 74, another mech cluster, completely locking me in my base. At this point, I consider moving my pawns into my mom's basement and collecting one of each kind of roach. Still, this time I was smart enough to build a wall before the mechs activated. Oddly, my pawns were happy enough to throw a party in the middle of the apocalypse. Since Are couldn't hit anything with her scars, I replaced her with Harker, who sadly lost a kidney during the battle. Things started to look better when a crash shuttle quest appeared in the perfect spot to take over the turrets. But never mind. Luckily, the true heroes of these 100 days showed up, raiders with short-range weapons. They took out one of the clusters for me, and I could finally breathe. The next day, as things settled down, a mad horse broke into my house, causing chaos. Shortly after, I bought components from a trader. The chaos spilled into the next day. The map was finally cleared. Meanwhile, I continued taming animals, including mare number 12. Things started to pick up, and not long after I tamed a tortoise, a hare, and best of all, a fox. I didn't name it Flannel because it would be kinda weird, so it was going to be Red Fox number 16, has a nice ring to it. On day 88 I tried taming rhinos, which have about a 1 in 250 chance of bonding with a medic tending to them. On day 89, a rhino I rescued got up for round 2, but Felix lost an eye in the process. Since the rhino was too healthy, I figured out hitting it some more would help. Spoiler, it didn't. The following day, I found another hurt rhino and rescued it. I tried taming it with a 6% chance but failed. By the end of the day, another mech cluster appeared. The new cluster had a fog weather controller, but I put off dealing with it. Meanwhile, some yaks joined, so I slaughtered my male yak for a female one, that I could milk. Later, I dealt with a mech cluster in a chaotic fight. One rogue mech broke into my base, chasing Mole and wreaking havoc. To make matters worse, Ares' scar were affecting her manipulation, so I upgraded her with a bionic arm. Despite using literal medicine, the surgery failed. On the bright side, the next day, I harvested hay just in time to avoid running out of nutrition. As Ari recovered and the animals needed more taming, Noriko, a wreckage explorer with a passion for animals, fell from the sky. She was exactly what I'll need in the future. With 17 animals collected, the first 100 days of this challenge came to an end.